And Cam, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you, Jane. And hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. We have currently 143 people in the meeting, so that's great. Great turnout. We're really happy to provide these trainings and on topics that people need and can utilize. So 145 people now makes us very happy. Thanks all for taking some time to be here. So this is a follow-up session. We had our QGIS Part 1 training 1 year ago, and then just again a few months ago. So hopefully some people have attended that previous one. If not, we'll make this training accessible to you as a beginner, but it's really geared for people that have used QGIS a little bit before. A few things just as we start. So you can look in the chat, and actually maybe if one of my colleagues could share those links once again. There's a few links to download. Really just need to download, well, 3 things. One is hopefully you have QGIS installed on your computer, and you can open up QGIS. This will be the project that we will open up in a moment. I'll explain that more in a second. So hopefully you have this green Q icon that you can open up that QGIS software on your computer. It doesn't matter really what version you have. As long as it's 3 point something, you'll be okay for today's workshop. If you follow those links that were just shared in the chat again, thank you, Jing. There'll be a link to the big zip file. This file might take a moment to download. You can just click download here, and that will download all the data you need for today's workshop. There's also one PDF, and that link is also in the chat. This will be a step-by-step guide. This is everything we'll do today in the next 4 hours. So those are the 2 things at this point we'll ask you to download. I say it now in case this zip folder takes a little bit of time to download, and I'll go through a short presentation, and hopefully that gives you enough time to download those materials. So once you have it downloaded, yeah, you should see a zip file. You can put it somewhere on your computer, maybe on your C drive, if you're on a Windows computer, somewhere where you can easily access it. It's best if it's not right on the desktop, so somewhere on your C drive of your computer, this zip file. Once you have that step complete, just hang on and we will walk through the next steps together. Okay? Great. So let me go through a few slides here. This will be an overview of what we're going to cover in this training session. So hopefully you can see my screen. And yeah, just want to introduce our team. So we are the WHO GIS Center for Health. We're based in Geneva at the headquarters, but most of us are outside of Geneva. You can see on this map on the right, we are scattered all across the globe. So we're a fairly new and growing team. The GIS Center was just established in 2022, and we do many different tasks, but one of them is these training and capacity developments. So we do in-person, in-country trainings, as well as these virtual training programs. So I'm happy to see so many people here today. We're at 170 participants. Thanks for being here, and we hope to provide more trainings on any GIS-related tools and topics that are needed. Feel free to visit our GIS Hub. So this is our webpage for internal WHO use. Here you can find our past trainings, our upcoming trainings, spatial data. So if you're looking to make your own maps, you can find data here. You can request maps from our team, and a lot more. So feel free to scan this QR code or visit this website. You can bookmark it, and this is a great resource where we try and share all of the different work that the GIS Center does across the organization. So this is our part 2 training. I hope some of you have attended our part 1 in the past. Like I said, if not, that's fine. No problem at all. And this is a new one, so apologies if there's any technical difficulties. This is all new material, the first time we've shared it. Um, it's a little bit modular, so we're going to have different lessons, little chunks that we'll cover. It's not one continuous training that builds upon each other. So if you miss one part, if maybe during 1 hour of the training you fall behind or you have to step away, no problem. You'll be able to jump right back in the next modules. And I just want to thank the Ghana Country Office and Ghana Health Services. We recently did an in-country training in Ghana, and they very kindly agreed to let us use Ghana as an example area for this training and shared much of the data and were kindly allowing us to use that for you all. So thank you to the Ghana Country Office and Ghana Health Services. Today we'll be making maps of Ghana. However, these concepts and tools can apply at any other place or any other scale. So whether you work in a country office, regional office, globally, these same tools and skills will be applicable in your daily work. Great, so here's what QGIS will look like when you open it up and open the project that we've prepared for you. To save time, we have a project that's just ready to go. So we're not going to build a project from zero today, not from scratch. We have this project built and ready to go. Hopefully that will save us some time as we get started. And only a few more slides here, but these are some essentials as we get started. So this project that we've started, it's a file that you'll open in just a few moments. Remember that these project files, actually the project file itself is quite small. It just remembers where to find your data. So often the data that we show in a map can come from many places, and those files are often quite large. The project file is usually quite small. It just remembers where to find that. So with any GIS project, whether you're using QGIS or ArcGIS Pro or other GIS tools, it's important to be organized on your computer. And if any of these file paths, if your data moves folders or locations, your project can then break or be incomplete. So remember to stay organized. I would suggest today just work from the same folder. So choose a place to put your data folder today and keep it consistent and avoid moving things around. I think that'll make more sense once we open up the project and I'll walk you all through that step by step in a moment. Great, one quick note. So there's many types of files that can be read in GIS. Today we're going to be using one called a geo package, this GPKG. It's just one type of database. So our project is already connected to this geo package that you're downloading right now. And that database, geo package in this case, this database can contain a lot of different file types. And we'll talk more about what these file types are. But for now, just think that we have this database. In our case today, it's called a geo package. And it contains pretty much all the data we need for our workshop. And today, we're going to use two different types of data. So in GIS overall, these are the two kind of families of GIS data. Mostly, we'll be working with vector data. So these can be points or lines or polygons. For example, today we will have health facility points. We'll have roads that are lines. And then the regions and districts of Ghana, the polygons, the administrative areas. We'll also work with some raster data today. So raster data is like an image. It's made up of little cells or pixels, little squares, and inside of each of those is a value. So today we have some interesting raster data prepared for you. It's these population estimates. So it's raster data where in each square there's an estimated population. We have some other example raster data as well prepared for you, but I hope this population estimates that we'll be using today will be a good example and help explain what raster data is and how it can be utilized. So next, we will do a lot of analysis today. We'll use several different tools, but really this workshop, it's only a few hours and GIS is a large topic. So we will only scratch the surface on the power of GIS and the many tools that exist. There's a lot of tools built in to QGIS, and we'll use a few today that have been requested and noted that are important and useful to many people's work at WHO. But of course, in a few hours of workshop, we can't cover everything. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a better idea of some of the powers of QGIS and things you can do. And then from there, you can explore and learn on your own as well. Great. So one of the first things we'll do is review some things from the QGIS Part 1 workshop. And we will look at the administrative areas of Ghana, and we will practice symbolizing it in different ways. So just as we learned in the QGIS Part 1 workshop, we can symbolize things as qualitative data. So we can use colors to show just differences. Here we have the different districts of Ghana color-coded by their region. Or we can use colors on maps to show quantitative data. So here we can show population density using a light purple color to a dark purple color to show this quantitative data. So you'll make these similar maps to these in just a moment. Later today, we'll also edit data. So this was requested as a very useful skill to teach. And we will do some data editing. So with any data you see on your map in a GIS software, you can change it. You can add to it, you can delete things, and you can modify it. Often this is quite necessary, and we will explain how to edit data today. Of course, we don't have enough time to go into it in too much depth, but I think it'll be a good start and prove that you can change data. So for example, we will map out some health facilities across Ghana, and we'll show perhaps if a health facility's point is in an inaccurate location, we can move that point to increase its accuracy. Maybe if we find a point that is totally inaccurate somewhere far away from any building or even land, we can also delete that point if needed. We can also change the attributes of data, so the information that we have about each point or each line or each polygon. And we'll practice that with some roads. All roads of Ghana, we have that data prepared for you, and we will categorize those roads into major roads and minor roads. Great, here's a little bit more about raster data, and I think I'll show this slide when we get into it. So for now, I will jump out of this presentation and let's prepare our data folder. So hopefully you've been able to download this data folder. It's from a Google Drive. And that link, again, if you have not, has been shared in the chat. Let me turn off my camera here just to help our internet connection. And it's also very early in the morning for me, so you don't need to see my face. hopefully you've been able to download this zip file and you've put it somewhere in a folder on your computer. And then often this is a confusing part of any workshop, but it's a zipped, it's a compressed folder. So simply right click that folder and say extract all. And then we can say extract. It might take a moment. And in the end, you should be able to open that unzipped, so not the zipped file, but just a regular folder. And it should have these 4 files. That's all we'll need for today's workshop. Okay, I'll give everybody a moment to catch up on that. So hopefully you've been able to download this zip file. Again, the link is in the chat. Once there, you can unzip or extract that zip file. If you're on a Windows computer, simply right-click that zip file and say extract all, and then OK. If you're on a Macintosh computer, you just have to double-click that zip file and it will open. And once you see in the unzipped file these 4 files that it contains, you can open QGIS, or you can simply double-click this QGIS Learning Series Intermediate file here. This QGZ file is a QGIS project. Or if you open your QGIS software, you can go to Project Open, find this QGIS Learning Series Intermediate project in that folder. Be sure to choose not the zipped folder, but the unzipped folder. And that should open, and you should see a project. Your screen should look very similar to mine. Let us know in the chat if you have any problems with that. Hopefully that was a clear explanation. And I'll remind everybody that the other thing we've downloaded is this step-by-step tutorial. You can refer to that as well. This has the links to download the data and these same step-by-step instructions. If you're just joining, yeah, I think you can look above in the chat. There's the links to download the workshop data and the tutorial document. Yes, and if you get a message, thank you, Marta. If you get a message that the project was from a different version, there's no problem. So as long as you have version 3 point something of QGIS, you'll be good to go for this training. And in general today, yeah, if you get little warnings like that about the version or something like that, usually it's not a problem, but please do feel free to share it in the chat, and we can troubleshoot that. There are a lot of us here, 175 participants. So once again, thank you very much. And we do have a team. Jing and myself are joined by several of our other colleagues. So big thanks to them. And there's a whole team of us ready to help you in the chat. But just want to acknowledge there are many people, so we'll do our best to get to all of your questions. And we do have breakout rooms available. So if at any point you need some help, and we aren't able to just answer it quickly in the chat, just let us know in the chat or by raising your hand, and we can put you in a breakout room with one of our great colleagues who can help you answer your questions and get you caught up. So if you're just joining, my colleague Julia just shared the links again. The step number 2 in the chat was to download the training data. So it should be a zip folder. Oops. That link will take you to a page like this. You can click download, and it will download that zip file. Once again, once you have that zip file downloaded, I'd put it somewhere that makes sense on your computer, like a folder on your C drive, something like that. And then be sure to unzip, so extract, right-click on that zip file and say extract all. Then you'll have a unzipped regular folder that contains all of our workshop data for today. Once you have that, you can just double-click on this bottom file, QGIS Learning Series Intermediate. This is a QGIS project file, that .qgz file, and it should open up in QGIS and look just like this. If not, you can also go open QGIS, go to Open, Project, and Open, find that QGZ file in the data folder, and it should open just like this. Okay, if people are still working on that, please continue and let us know if you have questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll keep moving here and just do a quick review of some of the basics of QGIS and how to navigate this software. So I think many of your screens will look identical to mine. You'll have on the left side this layer panel with all of our different layers here. We can turn on and off these different layers. So right now we have loaded these administrative areas of Ghana. Again, Ghana is our example study area for today's workshop. So we have their regions, districts, and sub-districts. I can check on and off these layers and explore those different layers. Then we also have these base maps. So by default, I have this WHO base map with no labels. So if I zoom out, scrolling on my mouse, or with 2 fingers on your mouse pad, you can see this is our legally compliant custom WHO base map. So this is a custom base map. Your computer's pulling from online from WHO's servers. And this map shows the boundaries and the disputed borders and areas and administrative areas exactly as needed to be legally compliant. We have other options here. There's one with labels. So if you want labels on your map, that option exists as well. And then I've loaded a few other base maps here that will be useful as we go through the workshop today. So you can explore these other base maps. They just have different looks, different styles, but some of them are useful for different tasks. So for example, we can look at satellite imagery. If we want to zoom in and look at a specific place, as we zoom, we can use satellite imagery to investigate that area. So take a moment and just click through these different layers. Remember that the order matters. So if I turn on my satellite imagery, for example, but I also have one of my administrative areas checked, I can no longer see my satellite imagery because, of course, this green polygon is blocking it. So the layers on the top will be drawn on the top, and the layers on the bottom will be drawn below. So take a moment. You can't break anything. Feel free to just keep playing around, exploring these different layers that we have loaded. In this project, there's a lot more data we have as well, and we'll add it later. But for now, let's just look at these few layers that we have in the project and explore those. So take some time. And if for those who are still having trouble downloading the data and getting the project open, please let us know. We would be happy to help further or assign you to a breakout room with one of my great colleagues who can assist. I see the question in the chat about why are they all just one color? So that's just by default right now. This layer, for example, the 16 regions of Ghana are just one color, but we will practice how to change that later. Sure, so once again, just giving everyone a little bit of time to play around with this project. You can click on and off different layers. So we can explore these administrative areas of Ghana. And we can explore these different base maps. So see what information these different base maps, that's all these layers with this little blue icon beside them, contain. And you can zoom around and pan around on your map to explore. Just get comfortable moving around on your map and turning on and off the different layers. Okay, every few minutes, I suggest you get in the habit of just hitting save, that blue save icon in the top left of your screen. That way, if something happens, maybe your software crashes or your computer runs out of battery, your project will be saved and you can resume where you left off. So every few minutes, if you can remember, just click save and it'll save your project. So far, we haven't done much. Therefore, we don't have much to save, but just get in the habit of hitting save every so often. Okay, so yeah, for some people, and I see the questions about good XYZ tiles. So all these base maps are called XYZ tiles. You can see they are maps of the whole world, but as we zoom in, they change and become more refined, show more information. So these are some suggested good ones. You can review the QGIS Part 1 workshop to see there's a plugin that has many options for these types of base maps, and you can explore those. And sometimes, maybe if one is not showing anything, it might just be your internet connection. or occasionally the server for one of those might be a little bit slow. So if you're doing satellite imagery, for example, or this OpenStreetMap, it might be a little bit slow. Hopefully, eventually it should load. But if not, it's okay. You don't need to use each of these today. Yes, and great point, Joe. So labels on our maps will always come to the top. So even if I turn on layers above my base map with labels, I still see this text label here saying Ghana and so on. So labels will always go to the top, even though most things will be covered on that layer. Okay, next, let's explore one thing we didn't talk about in the previous workshops, which is this browser panel. I think by default, most of you will have this in the top left corner. If not, I can show you how to add it. Is if you go to View and then Panels, here this browser panel. So once again, View, Panels, and Browser panel. This is also the way we can add various panels and various toolbars. The panels go on the left and right sides of our screen, excuse me, and the toolbars are all those little buttons on the very top of your screen. So if you ever lose something, you can go up to View, add panels or toolbars, and for now, let's make sure to have this browser toolbar checked. And you can see it up here. There's a lot of things in this browser panel. And the most useful one that we'll use today is we can add a directory. So if you go to the favorites right here, should be the very top option with the yellow star. You can right click and say add a directory. You can navigate over to the folder where you saved the workshop data. Say select folder. I can remove this duplicate one. And then you'll have this quick access to the data folder today. Okay, so it's not essential, but I think it's quite handy. It's quite convenient to be able to look at all of the data we have in our database here, and we can quickly add other layers and see all the files and data we have in the folder in our quick access browser panel up here. Okay, and once again, just a reminder that I'm going step by step through this tutorial document. So if it's helpful, I know there's a lot of screens. You're juggling your own QGIS and my shared screen, but there are these step-by-step documents here that we're following along. So right now we're on page 3, looking at the browser panel. Great. So hopefully you're able to add a directory to your favorites here. And you can see in our Ghana Learning Series data, this database, there's many layers, and we'll be adding these layers later on. Okay. One other interface suggestion that we haven't talked about yet in our previous trainings is the bottom left corner. There's this search bar. Hopefully you see that in the bottom left corner of your screen. There's this search bar. It says type to locate. You can click there, or at any time you can push Control K and it will open. And you'll see there's a lot of different shortcuts and things we can search for in this toolbar. But this is very useful. For example, you can search for any tool. So later, for example, we'll use the clip tool. I can just search for that tool right here. You can also search for your own layers. So maybe if you have many layers in your project, you can search for them in this toolbar. And this is a useful feature of the interface that has been there. QGIS has added a lot of functionality to this search bar recently. We even, if I turn on my satellite image here, you can even search for places. So this is called geocoding. We can search for a place. So if I type the greater than sign, that's the symbol to search for a location in the search bar. And I can search for any kind of location. So for example, here is the location where we did this training in Ghana recently. Or I'll search for the big dam that's nearby. I can click that and it'll take me right to that location I searched for. Might not be perfect. It might not know every address or location globally, but it will be pretty good. If you're looking for a specific place, you can use this little search feature to look for a specific place. So feel free to search using the greater than sign and then type in where you're tuning in from today or anywhere in the world. Hopefully I can find it. It might take a moment to search, but you can type in anywhere. This is not searching our data from our project, but it's searching a global database of locations and addresses. Yes, so you can search anywhere. It's not just for Ghana. For example, I could search, let's see. If you have just the WHO base map, you might not see much detail. But I could search Golden Gate Bridge. And here's the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, nearby where I'm tuning in from today. So that can be useful, and actually we might use this feature later when we're editing some data, some health facilities, if we have time. But for the most part today, we'll just be looking at our sample data of Ghana. But once again, all these concepts and tools can apply in any area. We're using Ghana as our example area today. Cool. Thanks for the questions in the chat. And I think some people are getting helped in breakout rooms. So thanks to the whole team. We have a big group here, so I appreciate all of you. Just make sure if you're doing that geocoder you have to type in the greater than sign. Here, I'll put it in the chat. This one, oops. The greater than sign, oh, I don't think I can, that's a special character. I can't put it in the chat. The greater than sign first, and then your location. So I typed in something like this in the search bar, but without the quotes. Yes. Thank you, Sanju, for the question. Okay, so those are just some little tips and tricks to stay organized, the browser panel and this search bar. And feel free to keep playing around with those. But let's get into our layers that we have here, and we can review some of the symbology, changing how these layers look. Before we take our first break, maybe in about 15 or 20 minutes. So if you click save on your project, just in case, and let's turn on our WHO base map with no labels, the bottom layer, and our regions of Ghana. They should be that green color, admin 1 regions. And if you click this little paintbrush icon on the top left of your layer panel, that will open our layer styling panel on the right side. So this is the menu, how we can change the symbology or add labels to any layer. So we're going to change how this layer looks. This is review. We've done this in the previous trainings, but of course we can click here and change the color. It has this nice color wheel. We can just change the color. But we can also do more than that. We can click here on the layer styling panel and go from single symbol. So this will show all the 16 regions of Ghana as the same, just the same green color. Single symbol, but let's change that. Let's change that to something like categorized. So we're going to color code and categorize these regions. And we just have to say which field in the attribute table we want to categorize it by. So to do that, we need to know what information is in the table. So what information do we have about these 16 regions? Right now they disappeared, but they're actually still here. I'll just right click on that layer and say open attribute table. And here is the table for these 16 regions. So each row of these is one of the regions on the map. And this table is all the information we have about them. So for now, let's start simple. And let's just color code these regions by their name. So we have admin name level 1. I will go back to my layer styling panel and say admin name level 1. So I'm going to categorize my regions by that column, admin name level 1, and say classify. And this will give me a map of color-coded regions of Ghana. So now each region has its own unique color, and it's giving just random colors for now. Okay, so I know we've done this in the past trainings, but these are just some of the essential steps. Okay. We can also add labels to any layer. So let's add some labels to these regions. On this layer styling panel on the right side, we can click this yellow ABC icon that's below. This is for labels. And we can add some single labels here. And by default, it should just guess that maybe we want to use this admin level 1 name. So great, now we have these text labels. It might be a little hard to see since it's black labels on these colors. So we can adjust the font here. You can play around and add whichever font you'd like. And you can see there's all these label options. One useful thing is we can check this box for buffer. It has that kind of blue ABC tab on the label menu. You can draw these text buffers, so it's this little white buffered area around each label, and that makes them just a little bit easier to see. Okay, so hopefully if you attended our previous trainings, you remember these kind of basic steps. But many times we want to, change the symbology, not even just to make a nice looking map at the end, but just to also explore the data, to understand the data. We can use GIS to change the colors of things or the size of things, not only to make a nice looking product at the end, but also to just explore and understand the data from the very beginning. So once again, I changed my symbology to categorized, categorizing it by the admin1 name. And then under labels, this second tab on the layer styling panel, that yellow ABC tag, I added single labels. One question is, how do I add the label background? On this third tab over, it says buffer. You can add this check this box to add a little white buffered area so you can see the labels more easily. And the other question in the chat, this is very common. Just remember when you choose categorized and this admin1 name, if everything is blank here, you just have to push this classify button down here. Okay, so many times people get here and then they think, why is my map not showing up? I just have to push this button, classify, and everything will show. Okay, so that's categorizing data. So we're looking at a text field in the attribute table. We see each of these regions has a lot of information about it, including the name, and we color coded each region by categorizing it by that text field, that admin1 name. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, with anything, I see some questions in the chat. With anything that we do, remember there's many menus within menus. So usually I'll just cover the basics, but if you want to go deeper, you can. So for example, the labels, you can see how many different menus are on here. If you want to change the font or the size of your labels, you can see those options exist here. And this is common with all the things that we're going to do today. There's many menus inside of menus inside of menus. Sometimes too many. It can be confusing, but feel free to explore further and keep customizing your maps to show what you'd like it to show. Okay. Let's do one more step, and then we're at 1 hour, and we'll take a little break. So we showed how to categorize our regions, but let's now, instead of looking at just the name, let's look at some numbers. So I can open the attribute table again, right-click on my admin 1 regions, go to the attribute table. And if it's helpful, if you don't want this attribute table just floating around here, I know you have a lot of windows to juggle during this workshop. You can push this button all the way on the right on the attribute table, dock attribute table, and it will lock it to the bottom of your screen. I find that's much easier. So once again, I right-clicked on my regions, I said open attribute table, and I docked it with this button on the right side of the attribute table. You'll notice if you scroll all the way to the right side of your table, we have some useful numbers here of these regions. So I'm all the way on the right of the attribute table for my regions of Ghana layer. And I see there's 2 numbers. So we have total population, and I've calculated population density for each region. So let's, instead of now this color-coded map just showing different colors for different regions, let's use color to show these different numbers. Okay, so let's go back to our layer styling panel on the right side. And if you're lost or if you've fallen a bit behind, no problem. Maybe just try and catch up with this step. So if you weren't able to do this categorized step, no worries. Let's jump back in and proceed from here. So what we're going to do now is make a map not just showing categories, but let's show some numbers using colors. And I found in the attribute table we have some population and population density numbers. So I'll go back to my layer styling panel on the right. Once again, you can open that by clicking on our regions layer and hitting this paintbrush icon on the layer panel. And let's change the style from categorized to graduated. So everything will disappear again. We just have to let QGIS know how we'd like to symbolize it. And let's first choose population. So total population 2020. Again, I just have to hit classify here. And we now, by default, it's these red colors, show the total population of each region. So these darker red colors will show regions with higher population, and the light red to white colors are showing lower populations in each region. Okay, so once again, I changed my symbology from categorized to graduated. I chose this total population number, and I hit classify. And now we have a map showing total population. Yeah, so if you see something that is a yellow color, like I'll match Alvaro, your map here, that yellow just means that it's selected. So maybe in the table, you've clicked and selected a row. You can see here, as I select rows in the table, they will also select on the map. So yellow is the default color for selection. And we can also use the select tool up here on the toolbar. If we want to go the other way, we want to select something on the map, and we can see it selected in the table. So that's quite useful. We didn't cover those basics in this workshop yet. But often we select things in order to explore their attributes. So for now, let's just have our map not have any of these selections. You can simply, if you have selection mode on here, just click on some empty space, like on the water, or you can choose this button, deselect features, which is also on the attribute table as well. That little yellow boxes with the red no sign to deselect all features. Okay, so right now we're showing population. Although I think we could do a little bit better, and let's compare this map, and let's see how it looks if we change our value from total population to population density. So many times when we make a map like this, it's called a choropleth map. We're using colors to show values, to show numbers. Oftentimes we would want to normalize these numbers. So for example, if we're showing disease cases, it'd be best to show cases per capita or per 100,000 residents or something like that, rather than totals. So let's compare these maps. Let's go back to our styling panel on the right side. And let's change total population and let's choose population density instead. We'll have to click classify again. That's a key step here to recalculate these numbers. And you'll see that your map now has changed. Some areas, like Greater Accra, Ashanti region, are still this dark red color. They are both densely populated and highly populated, but other areas significantly changed. So once again, we're just comparing our map of total population with population density. If you can't do this step, no problem. We can circle back to it later. And just noting that these maps can be quite different. So in both we're showing population, but in one it's total population, and in one it's density, and the results are quite different in some cases. So I like to just point this out any workshop that we do on GIS to make sure everyone is thinking about how we can, how we visualize data really matters, and it can tell different stories. So it's important for us in GIS to make sure we're telling an honest and complete story. And it would be easy to tell a misleading story with a map. So just that difference, population total versus population density, shows quite different results. And thank you for sharing a screenshot of your map. It looks great. At any time in this workshop, everyone, please feel free to share a screenshot of your maps. That helps us know you're following along and that we're all doing this together. Yeah, and I see a bunch of questions. So of course we can customize this symbolization. So maybe we want to, I see, remove the boundaries or change the colors. Again, those are all in this menu. So we can change these colors. There's all sorts of different color ramps we can choose from. Nice. Ted, I see a great map. You've changed your colors as well. Looks really good. There's a lot of colors we can choose from, and you can customize your color ramps and choose colors very specifically. And if we click here on symbol, if you wanted to change the outline, remove the outline or something like that, of course we can do that in these menus. To keep moving in this workshop, I won't always have time to show all of those different options, but just know that if you want to change something very specific on your map, you will be able to. You just have to search for it, maybe in a few different clicks of different menus and different options. Great. Okay, so we've now finished kind of our review section. And let's take a short break, let's say a 5-minute break or so. And let's come back and we'll start module 2, if I can show on the screen here. Let's come back, we'll be on page 7, and we'll start this module 2 on cleaning and editing data. So this is a really key step in GIS, is we'll have some data that might need some fixing. Most data is imperfect, of course. And I've prepared some data and I added a few bugs, a few things that need some fixes, and we can add that all together. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. Come back at 15 minutes after the hour in most time zones, and see you in 5 minutes. And I can answer any further questions then. Okay, thanks everybody. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, everyone. Thanks for the questions in the chat, and big thank you for sharing your screenshots of your maps as well. It's looking good, looking like many people are doing quite nicely. If you've fallen behind at any point, no problem. As mentioned, this workshop is modular, so right now we just finished module 1. It was a little bit of a review. If you weren't able to complete all those steps, no problem. You can continue on with us, and we'll be doing different tasks in this next module. And as always, if you have specific questions or fall behind, we have a whole team of people here ready to help in a breakout room if needed. Okay, so module 2, which we'll start now, is all about cleaning and editing data. So we have this data very kindly shared by the Ghana Country Office and Ghana Health Services of health facilities. So these are points, and I edited a few points to have common errors or common data cleaning steps that we'll complete now. So if you see in your data folder, in fact, I can look at it right here in our browser panel as we've added. There's a CSV, so this is just a spreadsheet, and it says need cleaning, health facilities, Ghana 2024. If I just click and drag that onto my map, here I can X out of my attribute table and clean up my map a little bit. You'll see that we have a new layer here, this need cleaning health facilities, but I can't check it on and off. There's this little table icon beside the layer. That's because this is just a table. We need to add it in a different way in order to see it on the map. Okay, so I'm going to right click and say remove layer. And let's add this spreadsheet of health facilities a little bit different way. So if you have a table, like an Excel file, here it is in my data folder. So if you open a file explorer, just not in QGIS, but just on your computer, look at your data folder and find that need cleaning health facilities Ghana 2024. You can even open it in Excel if you have Excel. And you'll see here there's all sorts of information about these many, many health facilities. So we have over 1,400 health facilities. Ghana has excellent health facility data. So big thanks to them, big credit to them for this great data. And you'll notice that there's a latitude and longitude column in this data set. If you're not able to open it now, no problem. You can just watch me at this stage. So we have information for each one, the facility name, many other things about the facility, but very essential to put it on the map, we have a coordinate for each health facility as well. So I can close this table now. Don't save. And we can use that latitude, longitude to put it on the map. So regardless of what step you're on, or if I see there's some questions in the chat, let's all do this step together. This will be quite important. Okay. We can turn off all of our other layers. Maybe I'll leave on just this one base map. And let's click on the top menu, layer, and then add layer. And then this fourth option down, add delimited text layer. Okay, So this is this menu that will allow us to add, adding a special kind of layer that if you have any kind of table, like an Excel file or a CSV file, these are just spreadsheets. We can add them using this method. So this is quite useful. Here, I'll push this dot, dot, dot button, the 3 dots in the top right corner. I will find my data folder. That's that big file you all downloaded, the folder with all of today's data. And I will select that Need Cleaning Health Facilities Ghana. Let's say open. And hopefully, automatically, your QGIS has looked at this CSV and it's decided that there are point coordinates. So you can check here, it should say that there's a point coordinates and that automatically the longitude and latitude are those location coordinates. If not, you might need to click that and manually select those. But usually QGIS is quite smart about this. And here, this part is key as well. I'm curious if your screen matches mine, what the coordinate reference system where it says geometry CRS. Let's just make sure that that says, should be the default one, this WGS 84. So it should say, and by default, it might say invalid or unknown. Just hit this drop-down menu and choose this one, WGS 84. So it should say EPSG 4326 WGS 84. Sorry, I know that's quite confusing, but this is the usual latitude, longitude coordinate reference system. Okay, you should see a little preview here of your data, and the rest of the options you should be able to leave as the default. And I can say add. I'll close this window. Great. So now we have these points. We have tons of points. These are all the health facilities in this data set across the country of Ghana. Okay, so once again, we tried to just add this CSV just by dragging and dropping, and this is answering some questions in the chat. Yeah, so most times, if it's a spatial file, like a geodatabase or a shape file, something like that, we can just drag and drop them and they'll show up on the map. However, if it's a table like this, it's just like an Excel table or a CSV, QGIS won't know exactly what to do with it, so we have to add that in the different way that we just showed, adding this delimited text layer. Luckily, this CSV was formatted well so that QGIS could guess and say, okay, there's latitude and there's longitude. It was just guessing that, okay, these are the location information for this layer. However, so hopefully by adding that, and feel free if you weren't able to add it, you can review the tutorial document here. It will show maybe an easier image to see on how to add these points. And I see some people in the chat are able to add them. However, we do have a couple little issues with this data. There's some inaccurate points. These, for the record, were not inaccurate by the Ghana Country Office, but I added them intentionally. I added some points that needed cleaning. So if I right-click on this layer that we've just added of all these points and say zoom to layer, you'll notice, we have 2 points way out here. They're in the ocean. I don't think that these are the correct locations for these points. So let's investigate that, and we'll do some practice in a few different ways of data cleaning for these health facilities. And yes, we can discuss later how we can change the symbology. So maybe for the health facilities, you want to change how the points look. You can make them little hospital icons, something like that. In fact, there's these default suggestions for the points. One is a hospital. But for now, let's focus on the data cleaning, and we can change the symbology later on. Okay, so I see these 2 points. They're not in the same place, but they're both in the ocean. So I'm curious what's going on there. Um, I I can, if I want to investigate these points, I can open the attribute table, just as we've done before. Since there's so many in this layer, it might be easiest to say show selected features. And I'll select these 2 points. So I'm in selection mode here at the top. And I've changed my attribute table to say show selected features. I can select these 2 points, and I can see, looks like they have different errors. So one, it looks like on this point here, the latitude and longitude just says 0, 0. This is a very common problem when you're adding points or actually any kind of spatial data. Sometimes if you're missing information, maybe this should be empty, just unknown latitude and longitude. Sometimes at some step that can get converted to 0, and some of your data will show up here. This is kind of a funny location for GIS people because it so happens to be close to Ghana, but no matter what country you're adding data for, could be far away, many times things will show up right here at 0, 0 latitude, longitude. There's nothing here, it's in the ocean, there's no island or anything, but many times if you're missing some data, check this place just off the south coast of Ghana, just a coincidence for today's focus area. And this is latitude, longitude 0, 0. Okay, maybe we'll have to investigate further what this point, this inaccurate point is. And to do that, it might be best to open that table. So I'm going to go back to my data folder. And if you're not able to open Excel on your computer currently, it might be too many windows. You can just watch me on this step or feel free to follow along. So I'll reopen this CSV, the need cleaning CSV. And let's investigate these latitude, longitude points. So sure enough, and I made it easy for us, is I put the points that have issues towards the top of the list. You'll see that this third row here, the second health facility, is 0, 0. So these points are clearly not accurate. So we could either get new data, look up where this health facility is, but I think just for our purposes today, we can just delete this row. So I'm going to right click and just say delete, and I'm going to delete that row that has inaccurate data. Okay. The other inaccurate point, and I included these because this is very, very common. If you have a list of coordinates, 0, 0 is one common error that can happen, and you'll need to clean that data. Another common error is this cross-care clinic, which is in row 6, or it might be row 7 if you haven't deleted that other one, is I see that for the rest of Ghana, the latitude numbers are positive, except for this one, this cross-care clinic, and that the longitude numbers for all of Ghana are small negative values, except for this one. So I think what happened here is these coordinates were flipped. X and Y were inversed to Y and X. Again, this is a very common mistake that can happen, and we simply just need to invert these. So I will copy this value. Maybe I'll just put it here as a placeholder. Copy this value and move it over. And I will invert those values. So now they match. The latitude should be the positive value. The longitude should be the negative value. Okay, again, if you're not able to follow all these steps, that's okay. You can just watch me, or feel free to try it out as you go. But in the end, this happens many times when we add data. We look at it on the map like this. We see, uh-oh, okay, it looks like there's some issues. Let's go look back at our original data, resolve some of those issues, and then we can re-add it to the map. So now that I fixed those 2 points, I will save this as a new CSV. So I'll go to File, Save As. I'll call this Cleaned Health Facilities. And say Save. I can X out of this table now. And I'll repeat the steps we did earlier. So I'll go to Layer, Add Layer, add delimited text layer, just as we did before, same exact steps. This time I can select our cleaned facilities. I can say Open. Same options as before. I can add. And now I have these green points, and you can see my first layer that had the 2 issues, these pink points here. In my new layer, this green layer, I don't have any of those inaccurate points. So yes, a great question in the chat. We can later, I'll show in our next activity how to edit data that's on the map as well. But sometimes, like in this case, it might be easier to edit the original data, so that spreadsheet that has the coordinates. Once again, if you weren't able to follow all those steps, no problem. But hopefully this is a good example of some data cleaning, which is a very common and necessary GIS activity. Great. So whichever one you have, whether you have the layer with these 2 points in the ocean, or a cleaned one with just points within Ghana, we can proceed to the next step. But hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so we had 2 inaccurate points. We could tell they were inaccurate quite easily because they were far outside of the country and, in fact, in the ocean, in the Eastern Atlantic Ocean here. So we knew that they're inaccurate. If a point is inaccurate, but still within the country, we haven't identified that yet. So we haven't been able to clean that that fix those inaccuracies yet. So that's a great point as well. And we'll next do some steps to evaluate the accuracy of these points that are within the country of Ghana. Okay, so hopefully that's a good example. Many times when you add some data, you'll see, oh, I think this little thing here or something else over here needs some fixing, and you'll have to do a few steps on that. Many times when we do trainings, we like the data to be very clean and ready to go. But in reality, in real day-to-day GIS work, the data is usually quite messy and requires some cleaning and some fixing. Okay. So next, we're going to investigate these points that we have remaining. And in order to do that, in order to then edit those, we're going to need to export this layer. So right now it's still just pulling from that spreadsheet, that CSV. But to make changes, we will need to add it to our geo database, our geo package. That way we'll be able to edit the geometry and the attributes. It'll be a new file. So regardless of what step you're on, as long as you have some layer of points, whether it's those ones that still need cleaning or not, right-click on that layer. So let's all do this together. Let's go to Export and Save Features As. That will open this menu here. Let's save this layer as a geo package. It should be the very top option here, geo package. And we just need to hit this button with the 3 dots and choose your folder that has today's workshop data. And we can call it something like Cleaned Health Facilities. Say save. And then OK. And I'll go through those steps one last time. So when I hit OK, I now have a new layer, yet another layer. That's called Clean Health Facilities, the name I just chose, here in my layer list. So once again, I right-click on the original layer that I added. This is pulling from that spreadsheet that we made some changes to. I go to Export and then Save Features As. Let's save this as a geo package. So we're creating a new file in our data folder. I click this 3 dots button and go to the folder that has today's data. Let's give it a name, Clean Health Facilities, something like that. And then OK. Once you export this, so you should see either in the File Explorer or on your browser panel here that you have a new geo package of this Cleaned Health Facilities. So this is a new layer that we just created. This is no longer pulling from that original spreadsheet. Instead, it is a new file that we've just made. So when you have that completed, you can even right-click and remove your previous layers. And let's keep just that new one that you created that you've saved as a new file. Okay, so I know that was many steps. Once again, if you fall behind at any point, no worries. We will share the recording. You also have that tutorial document. And once we finish these health facilities steps, we'll be moving on to another activity and you can jump back in. Okay, this next part I think should be quite fun. If you have your health facility points, let's be sure those are turned on. And let's turn on this Google satellite base map here. So now we're going to investigate the quality. We were easily able to identify those 2 points that were out in the ocean. Those were clearly inaccurate points. But let's assess the quality, the accuracy of all these points. So one good way to do that is to use different base maps. So we'll use a couple different base maps for this activity, but the Google satellite one is quite convenient. And zoom in to different areas on your map. If you keep zooming, you'll find that most areas have a quite clear and crisp satellite imagery in Ghana. So I see this point here. It might be a little hard to see. I'll change the color to make it easier for y'all to see it. Maybe something like this. Feel free to adjust your colors as well, however you need. So now I have this big orange circle. That is my health facility. And I see that this one, I just zoomed into a random place. Feel free to keep exploring and just zooming in very close to different points. This one looks quite accurate. I see it's attached to this large building. I'm not sure for sure if this is a health facility. I can turn on even a different base map and see, okay, we don't have much additional information, but this point I assume is quite good. It's right on the top of a building. So I can zoom out. Maybe I'll go to an urban area. Let's see if we can, what else we can see. So this point looks like it's around a large complex. This point as well. I can turn on different base maps and see, sure enough, even this OpenStreetMap OSM standard base map shows a health facility here. This is just from the base map. And we have this point that corresponds. So take some time and look around and see if you can find it. Most points are probably quite accurate. This should be right on top of a building. Maybe I'll go somewhere less urban. And okay, here's a good example of one that might not be too accurate. Hyunju, it looks like you found one also that's just in nature. It's not attached to any building. And this is quite common with point data. When any point data is collected with like a GPS unit or even a cell phone, sometimes it might not be too accurate. If you don't have a good signal at that moment, or you're inside of a building when you collect the coordinate, sometimes these coordinate locations can be a little bit inaccurate or even very inaccurate, many kilometers away from their true location. So see if you can find any that might need some adjustment. And overall, this is just practicing a really essential, important GIS task, which is evaluating the quality of the data. So right now, we're not even evaluating the attributes, like the information we have about this facility, like the name and the capacity, but just the location, just where they are. If you find one, feel free to copy this coordinate down here in the bottom of your screen. You can see coordinate. So I'll share this one in the chat. Hyunju, you can share one that you found as well. And if you copy this coordinate in the chat and paste it into this coordinate field down here, if I like move over here, I should be able to paste that. Oops, I think I have to delete any spaces. Somehow I should be able to, yeah, zoom to that exact spot. That's not working perfectly on my side. Not sure why. But that's okay. It seems like I think due to the projection, it's not working perfectly, but that's okay. This copy and pasting coordinates. Maybe if it's working for anybody else, let us know. And but you can keep sharing those, or you can share screenshots that you find, and just keep exploring. So use different base maps that can be useful, and find some that look quite accurate or even just interesting, and then maybe find some that look could be inaccurate. So here's another one that looks like it might be not in a accurate location. So again, this is not due to any poor data collection by the Ghana Country Office or Ghana Health Services. This is very, very typical of any GIS data. If you zoom in close enough, the accuracy will not always be perfect. Okay. So just find one point now. Hopefully you've had some time to explore and investigate. I find it quite fun. GIS people like this task of looking at satellite imagery or other base maps and assessing the quality of data. So find one point. If you're not able to find one that is inaccurate, it's okay. Just any one point you can find, even if it's directly on top of a building. Here, that's a very interesting one. That's a busy area. Thanks for sharing. So let everybody just find one point. Doesn't matter exactly where it is, or it can be accurate or not. And let's just find one point. And we're going to practice editing that point. Okay, so there's two things we can edit, which are the geometry, so the location, and we can also edit the attributes. For now, we're going to practice editing the location. of each point. So we can actually move these dots, these points around. So find one point, turn on selection mode here so you can select it. So it should turn yellow. So that's this yellow box with the white arrow, selection mode. Let's select this point and select your layer for your health facilities. Be sure that this is the layer we've exported. If it's just still from the CSV, you won't be able to edit it. So if you're not able to, that's okay. You can just watch my screen. But make sure it's the layer that is the exported file. Then to edit any data, we have to turn on editing. So that's this little yellow pencil icon on the top. So when I click this icon, editing mode is now on. So you'll see there's that yellow pencil icon beside the layer as well. And when this is on, you want to be a little bit careful. So right now we could delete or change any of the points in this layer. And I caution you, don't have editing mode just turned on for many layers and leave it on. Then you can accidentally change or delete some of your data. So only turn editing mode on when you're actively editing, and then turn it off when you've finished some edits. So I have editing mode on now. If it's inactive, it's probably because you, on the layer panel, you have a layer selected that is not editable. So like I said, if it's those points that we added from the CSV, from the table, that will not be editable. You'll have to choose the layer that we've exported. So make sure you select the point layer of the health facilities that we exported as a new file. Okay, for example, if I select my base map here, of course, I can't edit this Google satellite base map. My editing mode is not active. But with my points, these health facilities, because I exported it as a new file, that file is editable, able to be edited, and I can turn on editing mode. Okay, so editing mode is on. And the next thing I'll do is I have to activate this toolbar that has many editing tools. So just go back to that view menu, just as we're doing, and there was conversation in the chat about. Go to toolbars, and then let's turn on this top one. So view toolbars, and then this advanced digitizing toolbar. Cool, this advanced digitizing toolbar. You'll see now you have a third row of buttons. We have all these buttons. These are different editing and digitizing tools. And the second one from the left, it has 3 dots with a little arrow, is a tool called Move Features. So this one allows us, if we select a layer where editing is enabled, I can click Move Features, and that will allow me to actually move this point. Okay. Now I'll have to decide in my situation, I'm not sure where this point belongs. It was right here originally. So I'd have to do some investigation and maybe decision making around where this health facility truly is. For our purposes today, we're just practicing, so you can move it anywhere. But maybe I'll guess that this closest building, that this closest building here is the true health facility. Of course, I can't be sure of that. So I might need to, if this was an actual assignment, I would have to, use some local knowledge or ask some colleagues to verify. But when I push this move feature button, I can move any point I have selected and move it into by clicking and clicking again, move it to the place that I need. So again, only in order to do that, editing mode has to be on for that layer. You need to have that layer selected in the layers panel. And you have to select that feature. So turn on selection mode up here. Select that feature so it should turn yellow. And once all that occurs, it should be activated. So you can say move feature with this move feature button. Okay, so again, we're just practicing now. It's okay if you move things, just any point, feel free to move it around and just practice. Once you've made some changes, you can turn editing mode off using that same yellow pencil icon. And you'll notice every time you make an edit and you turn editing mode off, this message will pop up and it says, do you want to save these changes? And this is an important decision because here, if I click save, as I will do right now, I now have made those edits and I can't go back. So I've edited that file. There's not a way I can just click undo and go back. So when you click save for some edits, you want to be sure that you know which edits you've made and that you want to keep those edits. I can then turn editing mode back on, continue further. So I have editing mode on. I can select a feature. And so some questions in the chat, you need to have editing mode enabled for that layer and have one of your points selected using selection mode. Only then will these digitizing toolbar buttons be activated. So QGIS will only show you the tools. You'll notice many tools, many buttons on the toolbar are gray at different times. It's only showing you ones that currently can be used. So if your editing mode is not on, of course, all of your editing tools here that we added in the new toolbar will not be activated. Okay, so at any point I want to edit some data. Maybe I'll zoom to a different point. Okay, this one looks quite accurate, I'm guessing. It's right next to a building, or here's a larger building, but just for demonstration, I can select that, turn on editing mode. Once editing mode is on, I can use these different digitizing tools. I can say move feature, and I'll put it right on top of this building. I can turn editing off. It's warning me, do you want to save these edits? Are you sure? This is your last chance to discard these edits. I'll say save, and my edits have been made. Okay, there's many other things we can do with editing, but I think just moving points is a good place to start for this workshop. Okay, if you have any questions on that, I think we've answered most, but please put them in the chat. And we'll keep moving here. So of course, we're just editing points right now by moving them. You can edit polygons and lines if you need to adjust roads or your administrative areas or your health boundaries. You can edit all of those. It's a little more complicated, but then just moving points. But I think this is a good example that we can edit the geometry, the location of our GIS data. And yeah, great question, Pravesh. So we are editing, remember, we exported this file. So we're editing that exported file we created. Our original CSV, our original table remains unchanged. We're not editing that. And in fact, the latitude and longitude of these points, so here's the point I just edited. Actually, this latitude longitude will not automatically update. We would have to recalculate that. So when you edit data, remember that not all fields will automatically update. Like if I moved this point into a different region of Ghana, this region name would stay the same. It would not update automatically. We would have to modify those ourselves. Great, I hope that makes sense. And yeah, be sure to save your projects every so often. There's someone in the chat, Kwong, sorry, your QGIS crashed. So save your projects up here at the top. And in addition, when you're making edits, be sure to turn off editing mode or click that Save Edits button every so often to save your edits. It can, of course, just like any software, your computer can crash. And Fidan, yeah, just make sure that your table there, so I see your attribute table is for your admin1 regions, not your points. So sometimes if you have many attribute tables open at the same time, it can get confusing which table relates to which features. So make sure if you're looking at a table, you can see here at the top which layer it corresponds to. And yes, Alvaro, so great point. So many times if we compare data across different layers, your screenshot, everyone can check out the chat, is a very nice one. You'll notice that it doesn't always match up. So maybe the region that these points belong to doesn't always match the districts or regions of our other layers. So that's another thing we can edit with data, is comparing it across different layers. And that's really where the power of GIS is. We can compare different inputs and see where they are on the map. And sometimes we'll find that they might not be perfectly in alignment across different layers. So great point. Okay, I think we'll wrap up now this activity. I hope that was a good introduction into editing data. And let's do one more step. This is module 3, exercise 1. So we're moving right along here. And after this next exercise, we're going to run a processing tool. Let's take a next break, a 5-minute break. So hopefully you all can hang in there. Let's just run one tool and then we'll take a break. I think that'll be a good time. Okay, thanks everybody for your time and attention. I know this is a long training. It's hard to sit through these long virtual trainings, but we appreciate you. And yeah, hopefully this has been useful so far to our big group. Okay, so for this next step, yeah, good point. So just wrapping up. So right now we practiced editing these point locations. Let me make these points a little smaller. So of course, if this was your real project, you'd want to spend a lot of time evaluating the accuracy of your data, fixing these little points, modifying the locations. And when we edit things, we can also edit the attributes. So when editing mode is on, I should have mentioned this. When editing mode is on, you want to be careful because you also can just go and edit attributes. So here I could change this facility name. Since editing mode is on, I can edit any of these attributes freely. So I don't want to do that. in this case, so I'll discard those edits. But we can change the location, the geometry of our data, and we can also change the attributes. As what we'll do later is we can automatically do some calculations as well, and I think that will make things more clear. But for now, let's say that I will just adjust my layers here quickly for demonstration. Just 1 second. Okay. So let's say we have our 16 regions of Ghana, and we want to count how many health facilities are in each region. Of course, we can look at the attribute table for these health facilities, and we can summarize it in that way. But as was pointed out earlier by Alvaro, a great point, that sometimes the region and the attributes doesn't, if they're right on the border of regions, they might not always match. So maybe we want to do a fresh count, and we want to determine, okay, how many health facilities are inside each region? This is very useful and something really only GIS can do. So to do that, we're going to run a tool. And this tool will simply just count the number of these, in my case, pink points that are within each region. Okay. So no matter where you are, let's save your project. Let's be sure that you've turned editing mode off on all of your layers. So you should see no little yellow pencil icons on any of your layers, and save your edits. And we're going to run a tool. So if you're following along, we're on page 14, counting points by area. So my editing is off on all my layers. I'm saving my project. And then let's open the processing toolbar. So I can go up to processing on my top menu and say toolbox. So processing and toolbox here. That will open the processing toolbox panel on the right side. And let's search for a tool called Count Points in Polygon. I can put that in the chat. If you want to copy and paste it, you can just search that, Count Points in Polygon. And this tool is actually a type of what's called a spatial join in GIS. So we're going to join two layers. We're going to count how many points are within each region of our 16 regions of Ghana. Okay, so in the processing toolbox, I search for that tool. I can click and open it up. And it's quite a simple tool. So here we just have to choose which polygons and which points we want to compare. So I'm going to choose my admin 1 regions for my polygons. And for points, of course, I'll choose that cleaned health facilities, that points layer we were just editing. Okay, I'll leave everything else as default. And you'll note that in our resulting layer, we're going to have a new column in the attribute table, a new field called num points. And this is how many of our health facilities are in each region. Okay, So once again, my polygons are my regions, my admin 1 regions, my points are my health facilities. I can click run. I do get some warnings here, and this is very common when you run a tool. But as long as there's nothing red that says errors, just these orange warnings, it's usually okay. I can say close, and I have a new resulting layer. So let's investigate this. So whenever you run a tool, the result will be a layer with a name that relates to that tool. So in this case, we have a new layer called count. I can uncheck all those other layers, just having count layer on. And it looks right now just like our 16 regions, just like our original regions layer. So nothing too special here. But let's open the attribute table and see what happened. So what's the change that has been made? So in the attribute table, sure enough, if I scroll all the way to the right, there is this new field, new column called num points. And this has a count of how many of those health facilities are inside each region. So all the way on the right in the attribute table of my resulting layer called count, I have this new column called num points with numbers. These are counts of how many health facilities are in each region. Now, if I was doing this analysis for real, I would do some checks. I would do some maybe manual counts or make sure that those numbers are accurate. Whenever we run a tool, we want to check and make sure that the results are what we want, what we think they should be, or that nothing strange happened. But in this case, I think we can trust that our results are good. Cool. So that's very powerful. Of course, we can do this same process, run these similar tools for any topic. It doesn't have to be only health facilities in regions. It could be for any topic, but it's very powerful that we can count or summarize. We can even do statistics for points within polygons or any type of spatial relationship like that. Awesome. So if you have this resulting count layer, you're good to go for the next step. Let's just save our projects and let's take a 5-minute break. So let's come back in 5 minutes. I bet Santosh, or let's see, Bizwehu, that is probably a common error other people have, and I can help with that if the processing is not visible on the toolbar. I can help with that right now. But for everyone else, we can take a 5-minute break and I will type some instructions if you don't have this processing menu enabled. So let's take a 5-minute break and I'll type out some instructions if some people might have that situation. Okay, so I'll see everybody in 5 minutes. For me, that's 20 minutes after the hour, and we'll continue on. So thanks again for all your time and attention. Thank you. Okay, we'll get restarted in just a moment. I would guess with this many people in the training, several people had the same uh, issue where that processing is not visible on their top menu bar. If that's the case for you, I just put some instructions in the chat how to add the processing menu option. I hope that helps. Sometimes by default, I'm not sure why this processing menu is not on everybody's QGIS by default. So you just have to go to your plugins, manage install plugins, and just make sure this processing box is checked, or even uncheck and then recheck it. And that should enable this processing toolbox to show up right here. And thanks for sharing the screenshots, whether it's for a question or just to show where you are. So Tet, I really appreciate yours. You added some nice labels even to show the different counts of health facilities. Everybody check out that nice screenshot in the chat, and you can like it as well. So now you're really getting to see, everyone, how we can combine different layers. We just did a spatial join, so we counted how many of these pink dots were inside each of the regions. And that's a task that really you need GIS to do, to know where things are, not only how they relate, maybe by the region name of the health facility in the table, but where it is specifically is something that you really need GIS to understand. So Naimi, thank you. Looks great. Fidan, awesome. Love seeing all the maps. Okay, so let us know if there's any other questions or things holding you up. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving here. So again, we're on module 3. And we've completed exercise 1. So we have this count of how many health facilities are in each region. But many times we might want to go one step further. And for example here, you don't have to do this. I can just demonstrate quickly. I could make a quick map of the health facilities by area. Okay, so this is our num points. This is what we just calculated. This is the number of health facilities by region. The darker red are the more health facilities. However, just as we talked about before, this map might not really show us what we want to understand, because I know that, for example, these 3 regions have also huge populations. So it makes sense why Greater Accra, Ashanti region, for example, would have so many health facilities, because they have so many people. So this map doesn't really tell us too much information, but what would be a more insightful map would be maybe health facilities per capita, right? So of course, we could do a deeper analysis on which type of health facilities. Maybe you work on a specific disease or a specific field within public health. You might be more focused on maternal health and want to filter your locations for just facilities that have maternity care, for example. You could do the same process that we're doing on that specific topic. But right now, we're just treating all the health facilities, whether it's a small clinic or a large hospital, the same, just for a simple example. But let's calculate now, not just total health facilities, but exactly, Kuhn, numbers per 1,000 people. Okay, so in exercise 2, we're going to calculate a new field. So we're going to add yet another column to our attribute table of health facilities per capita. Okay, this is going to be a much more insightful metric for us to map. So on our count layer, this is the one we recently created. Let's open the attribute table, and I'll dock it down here. Let me clear this to give this some more space, so hopefully you can see this well. So here are the 16 regions of Ghana. This is my count layer, the one we newly created. And before we do the step, just make sure, once again, just give your projects a quick save. And we're going to create a new field, and we'll use this num points. So remember, num points is our number of health facilities. And we already have this total population of 2020 all the way on the right side of my attribute table. So we already have those numbers. That's really all we need. Let's click this field calculator button right here on the attribute table. Or you can click it up on this top menu bar. It's that little abacus icon for the field calculator. And that will open this new window. So this is called the field calculator. And this is how we can calculate a new column. Okay, we're adding a new field to our table. And let's call this, we have to give our field a name. So let's call this health facilities per capita. And let's have this be a decimal number. So that's important. We have to choose, when we create a new field, what type of field it is. So just like in Excel, like any spreadsheet, each of our columns of our attribute table, each of our what we call fields, those can be either numbers or dates or text strings. And it's important that we choose the appropriate one. Okay. Next, we'll go here into this drop-down menu in the middle here that says fields and values. That's where we can see all the existing columns in our attribute table, all the existing fields. And I can simply here click num points. Remember, that's our number of health facilities. I think I can make this larger so it's easier for you to see. There we go. So in this drop-down menu, fields and values, at the very bottom, I can say num points. That's our health facilities. And then I can click here or type a slash for division. And then total population. So this will give health facilities per capita, but these numbers will be quite small. So I agree with the suggestion in the chat. Let's actually multiply this by, let's say, 100,000. So 100,000 and then a asterisk symbol times number of points divided by population. And if it's easier, I can put this in the chat. You can just copy and paste that exact expression into your field calculator.
And I put her name in there. I just want to verify.
Yeah, I think she asked if anybody was getting in on Thursday, but she lives around there, so well.
Great. So you can copy and paste that expression right into the field calculator. I do think in the tutorial, I have this as health facilities per capita. Maybe we should change that to per 100K, something like that. You can feel free to name things however you'd like. But you can see now we have a little preview of our expressions. And they should be positive numbers. Looks like they're mostly between 1 and 10, which is quite good. Okay. So again, these are health facilities per 100,000 residents. And I see that in the
Oh, yep, we have a
Fidan
hand raised. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I see that we have a hand raised. Is this a good moment to take a pause to?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to unmute, or the person who raised your hand, you can now unmute if you would like to. Okay.
Okay.
All right, well then we will move forward. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay.
Awesome. No problem. No problem. And so whenever you make a calculation using this field calculator, yeah, you should see this little preview. I know there was a question in the chat. It might say invalid until you complete your expression. And this little preview here can help you see if your results are reasonable. And yeah, if you copy and paste what I put in the chat, make sure that this is a decimal number and you give it some name, and then you can click OK. If it's successful, you should have now a new field, a new column with that calculation. So this is really cool. This is very powerful. We just did several steps of this analysis to create this really useful statistic. So we started with just population of each region. We counted how many health facilities were in each region, and then we made another statistic of health facilities per 100,000 people. Hopefully this is a good example of we could apply the same steps to many different topics, and the result will be very useful statistics. Okay, you'll notice that editing mode is automatically turned on this layer. I have this little pencil icon. That's because we just edited this data in a little bit different way than before. We added a new column, a new field. So I'll turn editing mode off. I'll save those edits and save my project. And now our new field is locked in. Okay. Awesome. If any of those steps weren't clear, please, you can also remember you can refer to the document that has these very step-by-step instructions. You can even copy and paste that expression from there. And by the way, big thanks to Jing, my colleague Jing. She helped put this document together, and it's very clear, and hopefully it's useful for you all as you're going through this. Great. Fidan, thank you for the map. It's looking good. So now we can follow what Fidan has done, and we could open our symbology again. If you were able to calculate that new field, remember to turn editing off and save your edits. Now we can symbolize this by our new field, health facilities per capita or per 100,000 residents. Be sure to hit classify again. That will recalculate these categories. And you'll see that our map looks quite different than before. In fact, these high population urban areas, like Ashanti region here, Greater Accra, they're now very light colors. And these less urban regions are dark colors, have more health facilities per capita. And I would guess many countries probably fall in a similar situation. Now, it's not a perfect analysis. Of course, in the big cities, some of the health facilities are likely huge hospitals, where in the rural areas, many health facilities are probably small clinics. So, of course, with any analysis, there are some things to consider like that. But hopefully this simple analysis is a good example for you to understand the process. So thanks everybody for sharing your maps. They're looking really good. And you'll notice like Christopher, I see you added the health facility points on top. Emmanuel, you have different color ramps. So you can see how we can be creative here and adding different layers or different colors to tell our story differently. So I like that. I think adding the health facility points on top can add some additional information. Feel free to keep playing around. You don't need your map to always look the exact same as mine. Great. Cool. So we've done a little analysis here, and we've calculated a meaningful statistic. So we want to be sure now we save this layer. And if you remember, if you've done our past QGIS Part 1 training, which I recognize many names, so I know many of you are returners, you'll remember that when we run a tool, this little icon, this little microchip icon will appear beside that layer. So our count layer right now has this little icon, and if I hover my mouse over it, it says this is a temporary scratch layer only. So QGIS, to save space on your computer, it doesn't create a new file every time you run a processing tool. It creates these temporary layers. So actually, if I close QGIS now, I would lose my results here. This is just a temporary layer that's only saved while I have this project open right now. So since we just did a meaningful analysis that I want to maintain, we'll have to export this layer. Okay, so let's all do this together. So right-click on your count layer. This is the one we've just been working on. Go to Export and save features as, similar to what we did before for the health facilities. Let's save this as a geo package, just as we've done before. And remember to click this 3 dots button. Choose your data folder where you have all the data for today's workshop. We can call this something like Ghana regions, health facilities per population, something like that, whatever name makes sense to you. And I suggest when you save files, export files in QGIS, avoid having any spaces. You can use underscores, but spaces can cause some issues in some softwares. I can say save, and then OK. So once again, I right-clicked on my temporary layer, that one called count, and I went to save features as, and I saved this as a geo package as a new layer. You'll notice that our resulting layer doesn't have that temporary icon, that little microchip icon. Our new layer doesn't have that. This is a file we just created, so it's permanently saved. We can close QGIS and reopen it, and we'll still have this layer that is the results of our analysis. One quick note, here's just a useful tip. So regardless of which step you're on, let's say I know many people in the chat have shared their nice results on this count layer, and our exported layer now doesn't have that same style, your labels and your colors. So here's a tip. If I want to copy the style from my count layer onto my new layer, I can right click, count. I can go down to styles and copy style and say all style categories. Then I can right click on my new layer, for me this purple one, go down to styles, paste style, all style categories. And this will transfer all the styles, including the labels, the colors, everything from this layer onto my new layer. So that can save you a lot of work. I know many of you, Emmanuel, Christopher, Fidan, have shown screenshots of your nice maps. This will save you from having to redo all those clicks to apply those same colors onto the new layer. Great. So we've just exported this. So now this is a permanent file. Okay, yeah, Fidan, I see your question, and I bet many people have encountered this same one. So if you have this error message when you attempt to save, so you're exporting, likely it's because you just typed in a name here. So name of your new layer, you typed in that name, but you need to click this 3 dots button and choose the folder where to save it. Once you do that, you should see this full file path here. Not just a name that you've typed in, it should be this full file path. And when you hit save, it should be successful. Thanks for the question. That's a common problem people run into. Okay. Thanks, everyone. We're making good progress here. We have about 1 hour and 15 minutes left. So I think we'll have to skip some of the materials, but that's okay. That was expected. Like we said, this is the first time we've run this session. And I think for now, let's skip ahead. We're going to skip one little exercise and let's move on to module 4. So we've exported our results from this previous analysis. And I think for now, we'll skip this exercise 4, but it's quite useful. I can briefly explain it, but we won't have time to go through each step. But sometimes you might want to refine your data to only one area. So for that, we can use this useful tool called clip. So for example, if we had all of our health facilities, but we only wanted health facilities for one area, like in this case, the Ashanti region of Ghana, we can run a tool called clip, and that will cut out all the health facilities just for one area. So just like we did before, we run a processing tool. In this case, it's called clip, and it can remove all the health facilities from these other areas and just maintain ones in one area. So this is often quite useful. Usually a data set might be more data than you need, and you can refine it just for your focus area by using this tool called clip. So for time, we'll skip clip. We will not do this, but feel free to look at these step-by-step guides if you're inclined to practice that. Great. So let's skip ahead to this module 4. And I really want to skip ahead to this because we'll look at some different types of data. So let's explore some raster data. This is something we haven't done in any of our trainings up till now. So let's hit save on your projects. And if you weren't able to complete any of the previous modules, no problem. We're going to do something totally different in this next step. So save your projects and then go up to your browser panel where we added our folder for today's workshop. And in this database, that says Ghana Learning Series data, Ghana LS data, you'll see some of the data we've already been working on, but you'll also see some other layers that we haven't yet added. So let's add this raster data. It says population raster world pop. Hopefully you're able to see it here in our workshop database, population raster world pop. I can just click and drag and drop that onto my map. I'll uncheck all my other layers. We don't need anything else shown right now. Let's just look at this population raster. And at first, it should kind of look like just this kind of strange, splotchy areas on our map. And we'll discuss more what it means and how we can symbolize it next. Okay, if you're not able to access it through the browser panel, you also can just go to a file, not QGIS file, but just a regular file explorer on your computer. You can drag and drop our geo package. That's our Ghana Learning Series data, Ghana LS data geo package onto your QGIS. It will ask if you're already able to add it, you don't have to do this step, but just another way. Which of the many layers in that database do you want to add? And let's just select our population raster world pop and say add layer. Okay. So take a moment to just explore this layer, this population raster layer. And again, this is raster data, so it's quite different than vector data. Remember, raster data is like an image, like a picture, and it's just like a picture that you might take on your phone. It's made up of these little pixels or cells, okay? Each cell has a value in it. And in the case of the data we just added, the value, rather than being colors, like would be on a picture, is an estimate of population for different areas, okay? Raster data will have different resolutions. So some can be very fine resolution. These little squares will be very small, while other raster data might be less precise and have larger squares. So if you zoom in onto this raster data, once you get close enough, you'll start to see these little squares, and those are each of the cells of this data. Right now, they're just these black and gray colors. Doesn't mean much, but just explore it, and then we'll change those colors to be more meaningful in a moment. But once again, to add this population raster data, if you were able to add our class folder on your browser panel here, it should be under this Ghana Learning Series data geo package, this database. If you push that little arrow down, you can find this one called population raster world pop. If you can't find that, or you haven't set up this directory here, you can also just open a file, find our folder with our training data. Select this Ghana Learning Series data geo package. It should be the biggest file by far in that folder. You can just drag and drop that onto QGIS. And it will give you the option which of the many layers in this database do you want to add, and simply just select population raster world pop, and then click add layers. And your raster data should now show. Cool, so this raster data is estimates of population. And I think to understand it better, let's change how it's symbolized. So right now, this kind of grays and white and black color is a little bit difficult. So I think it'll make more sense if we change the colors, the symbology, just to explore. Okay, so this raster data, by default, this menu over here, our layer styling menu, which again, we can open with this little paintbrush icon, looks a little different because this is raster data, not vector data. But it functions in pretty much the same way. So let's change this from single band gray, just these kind of boring gray colors, to single band pseudo color. This will give us some more options. Okay, already looking a little more interesting here. And by default, I think everybody's QGIS will select this kind of yellow to purple color ramp. But I suggest now looking at these values, and remember, these are population estimates. So the darkest color here is around 4 people in each small square cell. And then the lighter colors are more people. I think it should be the opposite. So remember, we can use colors and symbology to just explore data. And let's right click on our color ramp here and say invert color ramp. Okay, nice. This is looking really cool now. So again, I changed the symbology of my population raster to this thing called single band pseudo color. And then I right clicked on the color ramp and said invert color ramp. Now, if we zoom in, we can see these darker colors. We can clearly see settlements, cities, small towns, with the darker color meaning more people, more population. And then to verify this, and I think this will be really a nice way to understand raster data, especially this population estimate raster data. Let's turn on Google Satellite, the base map, and we can zoom in. Let me find a small area here. Can give us some more space. Okay. And you'll see if I turn on and off my population raster, in the satellite image, I can clearly see some roads here, and then this smaller town, and then a little bit bigger town. And the population raster, so computers using machine learning have looked at the raster data, and they've been trained to say, guess how many people live in each of these little squares of the raster data, and they make an estimate. And you can see, actually, it's quite good at estimating these small settlements. Sometimes it might not be perfect, For example, let's see, I see there's these small squares here. There are indeed some visible buildings here. So there's this estimate here, this kind of out in a forested area. You'll certainly find areas where this raster data is not perfect, but it's pretty good at estimating where people live, not only just where, but also how many people live and the density. So this is very powerful. This data is from an organization called World Pop. There are several sources of similar population estimate raster data, but this one is quite good. And this is freely available data as well. So this is not a WHO data product, but it is a data product that we do use in our work. So take some time to explore. You can change the different base maps as well. And check out this raster data. Looking at different scales can be useful as well. We can see these big, dark urban areas of Accra and Kumasi in Ghana, the two biggest cities. So hopefully this is useful and interesting for people. Of course, as a GIS person, I find this very, very fun to look at this kind of data. We can even see these small settlements along this big lake, Lake Volta in Ghana. We can find these small settlements. So, of course, this is cool to look at, but then you might wonder, okay, how is this practical? How is this useful? And that's what we'll do next, is do some analysis using this data to summarize it by different areas. And feel free to share any screenshots. Thanks for those of you that have. If you find some interesting areas and of what your maps are looking like. Yes, so to answer your question, Kwang, there's different data products that use machine learning or artificial intelligence to analyze satellite imagery or drone imagery, any kind of data inputs, and they can be trained to estimate things like population. They can also be trained to identify buildings, roads, water, all sorts of things. And that's a very powerful part of GIS. That's more called remote sensing. A little bit outside of the scope of our workshop now, but it is something our team works on and is a very critical part of GIS and is a growing field within GIS. So this is one example also, I should mention, of raster data. We could have many other types of raster data. So this is showing population, but I think it's a good way to understand. Thank you for the screenshots. Those are looking very cool. We can have raster data that shows a variety of other things, right? It could be temperature, elevation, precipitation, land cover, all sorts of things. We can have raster data as a method to symbolize or structure those concepts. So don't think that raster data is always population. That's just this one example, and I think it's a good way to kind of understand what raster data is. Cool. So hopefully that helps you understand raster data and how we can symbolize it. There's a lot more that we could do there. But for now, let's do one activity with this data that I think can help show that not only do we use it for visualization, but we can use it for analysis as well. I don't think we'll have time today, but I should mention in the data folder, there is another similar file. It's vector data, and it's called populated areas. It's just for the Ashanti region of Ghana, but it's from a project that our team works on called GeoPod. And this one, I'll briefly show it here, but I don't think we'll have too much time to talk about it. It's very similar, but this is vector data, okay? So just briefly to talk about it, that's this pink area is here. This is vector data, so we can like select these, just like we did before with our polygons or our health facility points. And that's a little bit different than this raster data, but they're both modeling the same thing. So remember, we can have vector data or raster data on the same topics, and we can kind of use them in analysis in different ways. Sometimes it's nice to have vector data, sometimes raster data might be better, and we can convert between the two, in fact. So just something you can play around with. We don't have much time to explore this data fully, but we can go back and forth between these different data types. So I'll remove that for now. And let's do one analytical step with this raster data, and then we'll move on to making a nice map. Okay, so just as before, let's save our projects. And we're entering our final hour here. Thanks everybody for sticking with it. Just as before, we might not need this level of precision. This raster data is very fine detailed, but perhaps we want to summarize the total population of certain areas. So we know that in our regions here, we have that total population field. We already have that, and that's quite nice. That's useful for us. But let's say you're working in an area that, unlike Ghana, Ghana has a recent census. They have very accurate census population numbers. If you're working in an area maybe that does not have that available, you might find this population raster and want to summarize it by some areas. And of course, we could do that same process with any topic. We can summarize the raster data by some areas. So this could be estimating the population in your the country you work in or the region by some custom health boundaries, for example. So let's summarize. Let's see, if we look at this Ghana districts, this admin 2 areas, we haven't played around with these too much yet. We don't have any population estimates for these areas right now. In fact, Ghana does. They have a census that has accurate population counts here. But let's say we wanted to summarize how much population lives in each of these purple areas. We can use our population raster to run a tool to count each of these little squares and how many estimated people live in each square, and sum those up, total those up for each of these districts of Ghana. Okay? To do that, we'll run another tool. This one is called zonal statistics. You can put this in the chat. And after we run this tool, we'll take a short break again, our final break. So in the toolbox, if you search for zonal statistics, you can open that tool. And here, it's quite a simple tool. Let's choose our Ghana admin 2. These are the districts of Ghana. And let's choose our population raster for the raster layer. We can leave everything else as the default. And this tool will summarize all the raster data by each of our districts. Okay, I'll say run. Again, I see some warnings here, but no errors, so it's okay. I can close this window. And now I have this new layer, zonal statistics. That is the result of that tool. So we can check the attribute table. And sure enough, at the very right side of the attribute table, we have some new fields, count, sum, and mean. And the one we'll be interested in is this one called sum. So that's the sum of all the population estimates in each area. Okay, so in just a few seconds, QGIS was able to make a lot of calculations, and it added up all those populations of each little square by these district polygons. I think that's pretty amazing that it can do that, and so quickly. So then, nice, just as Christopher has shared, let's map this. So let's look at our zonal statistics, our resulting layer. And let's go to graduated. And let's look at that field called sum. Again, I just hit classify here. And we can see now which districts, so these are these smaller areas, smaller than our regions, and the total population is shown in these darker red colors. Awesome. So what we did is we just converted this raster data and we joined it through that zonal statistics tool and summarized it onto vector data. And now we're mapping that out. So my map looks, I think, identical to Christopher's. And hopefully that's a good example of how we can have different layers interact and we can do calculations between them. Great. Thanks for sharing your screenshots. Feel free to put any further screenshots in there of maps. Appreciate all of you for sticking around in our final hour here. And I think we'll take another break. So we kind of quickly went through this module 4. There are a few additional steps if you're inclined to practice more. Please check those out. And there's also more raster data in the folder, which is about travel times to health facilities, which is very interesting raster data. And you can check that out and play around with that as well. Great, thank you for sharing the screenshots. They're looking really good. And we'll take our final break now. So let's come back in about 5 minutes. And we'll skip ahead to our final module. We'll skip module 5 and we'll now do module 6 and do a quick map, make a map of some of our results and show some more advanced than our previous session, how to make a map layout with multiple map frames all together. So we'll work on module 6 when we get back.
And that'll be it for our workshop. So see you in 5 minutes for our final session. Thank you. Okay, we'll get started again in just one more minute. And thanks for the questions in the chat. I'll work on replying to those as we get going. And thanks everyone. I know this is a long training, 4 hours. Much appreciation and respect for staying around and participating in our final hour here. To answer the one question in the chat, so if you go to our GIS Center hub page, which we linked to earlier, I can put it in the chat again. Here is where there's a lot of resources. So you can request a map if you want our team to make a map for you. You can request that here. Here's a list of our trainings and knowledge series seminars. And here is our geodata. So there's a few things that you can choose from here. But one is our health boundaries. So these are our legally compliant health boundaries that we try to keep updated. And there's instructions here on how to download them. So today we just have data for Ghana, but of course you all work in different parts all over the world, and you can download the health boundaries at the different levels. So country level, regional level, and district level, or whatever those administrative areas are called in each country. You can download them all here. I will note the reason why we have this map request form is because there are a lot of rules on maps published with the WHO logo, published by WHO, and they have to comply with a long series of rules to make sure that there's no political issues and things are consistent. So please share any maps that you're working on in the future or that you'd like to publish in any form, whether it's on a website or a publication. And we can help you make those compliant, or of course, we can make them for you at no cost if you submit a map request on this page. Great. Hopefully that answers all your questions. Pierre, the labeling question, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into the menu. Somewhere in the menu, something must be going a little awry there. I think if you keep tinkering with it, hopefully you're able to sort it out. One thing you could do is, like we did before, go to a layer that the labels are working. Go to styles, copy style. This is a good just lesson for anybody. You can copy just the labels of a layer that the labels are working well, and then paste those styles, and then paste that style of labels onto that problematic layer. Okay. So we finished our looking at this population raster data. And note, we won't be doing anything further with that, but if you did want to save that layer, you'd have to export this, because note that it has that temporary icon beside it as the results of a processing tool. So if you do want to keep that layer, just as we did before, you can export it. I think for me now, just to save time, I'll just turn it off, and we won't use that one any further. Okay, so next, in our final step here, we are going to make a map, and we'll review how to make a print layout. So this is not just exploring on our QGIS window, but making an actual print layout, a high quality, professional looking map image. We practiced this in the QGIS part 1, and we'll do the same thing to review, but we'll also go one step further and have multiple map frames, multiple maps on our one map layout. And we can create a, I'll show our end result here, like a side-by-side map showing different layers, as well as this kind of inset map to show where Ghana is in the greater context of the region. Okay, so we'll see how much time we have. We might have to simplify this a little bit. But in general, it's often useful to have more than one map on your map. And we'll show how to set those up in a QGIS project. Okay, so here we go in our final module, module 6. So let's get a little organized here. We have all these layers we've been messing around with. I'm going to move we'll just have really 2 layers that we need to work with, as well as a base map. So if you have your layer that we calculated previously, your health facilities per capita, let's move that to the very top. So here I have that health facilities per capita layer. And then let's just move also our admin 1 regions, so our Ghana regions layer, also to the top. Okay, so I have these 2 layers here at the top. And the rest of these layers, and I have my WHO base map with no labels turned on. So those are the only 3 layers I need active. I can actually, just to clean up my project and stay organized, I'm going to click and hold Shift and select all the other layers that I don't need. And then I can right click and say group selected. So now all those other layers are in this group, and I can collapse that group to kind of hide them. So this is a key when you have a QGIS project like this that's starting to get quite large, is to keep your layers organized. And we can also rename layers and do many things to make sure we know where our results are, which layers relate to what data, and stay organized. So this group I can even rename and say layers we don't need right now, kind of giving it a funny name, but just for demonstration purposes, we're really only going to work with these base map, our Ghana regions, and the result of our previous steps are health facilities per population. If you don't have that one, maybe you missed that part of the training, no problem. Well, you can just use your admin 1 regions layer, your Ghana regions layer twice. And I can explain that next. Okay. So that's just one way to keep our project organized and not have all of our cluttered layers be jumbled and confusing. Okay, so first, why don't we start with our admin 1 regions. And let's make a graduated map out of those. And let's show this last column, population density. So here I have a map of population density. Maybe I'll change the color scheme, something like this. Or just to be consistent with the other materials, I can do purples for population density. And that'll be one of the layers we'll show side by side on our map. So feel free to play around with the colors, get them as you like. You don't have to match mine exactly. And feel free if you want to show other things. Really, what we're going to do is just make 2 side-by-side maps. So feel free to choose other layers or other metrics to show, as long as you have 2 maps that we can show side by side. So here I'm showing population density. And here is my health facilities per 100,000 residents. And to be consistent with the materials, I'll make this a shades of green map. Okay, so I have my 2 layers, health facilities per capita that we calculated earlier, and population density. Okay, so now that we're set up, these are going to be our 2 side-by-side maps. And on both of those, I just have our WHO base map underneath. Now, let's go up to project and we can create our print layout. So we can go to project and layouts, or sorry, and new print layout. I can call this Ghana Learning Series, July 2024, something like that. Choose any name for your layout. And now you may recall from our previous trainings that we'll now have 2 windows. Okay, so we have our main QGIS window, and now we have also our print layout window. So we'll be jumping back and forth between these 2 windows quite a bit. Okay, so what we're going to do now is divide this print layout in half, and that will allow us to have 2 side-by-side equally sized maps that we can compare side by side. So if we right click on I'm on my print layout window. Let's right click and go to page properties. You can see I think all of yours should be the same. Is by default, it's giving us an A4 sized page in the landscape orientation. Let me know if anybody's default is a different one, but I think by default it should be A4 size. Okay. So we need to split this A4 page in half exactly. And this is where GIS can be a little bit like a graphic design kind of thing. So one useful thing we can do as we plan our map layout is we can click on this Guides tab here. If you don't see that tab, you can go to View, Panels, and then Guides. So let's add a vertical guide. That's going to add this line that won't show up on our final map, but will help us arrange our map. This vertical guide right in the middle. And to do that, I can hit this green button here to add a vertical guide. And I have done the math for you and determined that right in the middle of an A4 page is a 148.5 millimeters. So I can paste that in here. Let's add that guide, a vertical guide right there at 148.5 millimeters. And you should see this little red dotted line now on your page, splitting your page exactly in half. If you're not able to follow that, that's okay. You can kind of do this next step and just make it quite close. Okay, so you can add many guides. Maybe if you're making a complex map with many map frames and many elements, you can use these guides to equally space and plan out your map layout. Okay. So next, let's add a map. So we can go up to add item on our layout window and say add map. And then I can click and drag. I'll start at the top left corner and then go all the way to the bottom right of that red dotted line that we just created. Great. So now it should show whatever's been currently active on your main window. If I change that and I jump back to my layout and I hit refresh, it should also update. So this map frame will always show exactly what is on my main QGIS window once I refresh the layout. Okay. Now, as we learned in the part 1 learning series, this part is a little tricky to adjust. Maybe I want to zoom in a little further on my map. I can use this selection tool here to select my map, or I can click it up here in the items. So I see these little white squares in the corners of my map frame. And then I'll use this Move Item Content button, this little button here with the 4 blue arrows. That will allow me to zoom very precisely however I want my map, or I can move it like this. This part is quite tricky, so it takes some time to get your map exactly where you want it. And once you have it where you like it, go back to that selection mode, that white arrow here, and your map will be locked in place. Now, if I scroll or something, it's just getting closer or farther from the page itself. It's not changing my map's extent. Okay, for time, we're going to make this quite a simple map, but that's okay. And feel free to share screenshots to let us know if you're following along or if you're stuck anywhere. I know this is hour number 4, so it's getting quite long. Thanks everybody for your time and attention. So even if your map's not perfect, that's okay. Let's add a legend, okay? So up on this Add Items menu, we won't probably have time in this workshop to add lots of things, but for sure on this type of map, we need a legend. Otherwise, nobody will know what do these colors mean. We need a legend for sure on this map. So let's go to Add Legend. I can draw a small box somewhere, maybe here where I have some space over the Atlantic Ocean. And you'll see that my legend is huge. It has all the layers from the whole project. So of course, I don't want that. But I'll show how we can adjust that. Okay, so hopefully you're able to add a legend. So again, add item, this is how we add any items to our layout, such as a map, labels like a title, and scale bars and so on. But let's add a legend. So here's my legend. And if I click that legend, you should be able to open the item properties on the right side. Now, by default, the legends have all the layers, which is a bit too many. So an easy shortcut that we can do, if you're in the item properties for your legend, by selecting it, we can just check this box down here, only show items inside linked map. Okay, so that really helped us. Now we only have the, in my case, green choropleth map. This is our health facilities per capita. In a legend, if I want to change the text here, this is just the layer name. I could jump back to my QGIS window and rename this layer, or just on the legend itself. Maybe actually that'll be the easiest way. I can go back to my main window and say rename. And say health facilities per 100,000 population. Might need to adjust my map a little bit to give me enough room for this legend. Okay. Cool. So now we have a simple map. Of course, we would add more elements like data sources and titles, things like that. But for now, let's just keep this simple because we're running out of time here for this workshop. So save your projects, and hopefully you can arrange your map. It's okay if it's not perfect, just for this practice. And hopefully you just have one map showing something and a legend accordingly. Okay, so next, and I think this part will make a lot of sense, and it's a little tricky, but it's very powerful how we can add another map frame to this map layout. So turn on selection mode here on this left toolbar, that white arrow button. And just draw a box to select both your map and the legend together. Okay, so I drew an arrow, and now let's hit Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste. And we should have an identical, both items, the legend and the map together. And we can place that on that second half of our map layout. So again, I can show that one more time. Let me delete these. I just selected both my map and my legend. I can see they're both selected up here. I hit Control-C, copy, or I think I can right click and say copy. And then I can right click and say paste. So here's both of those items, the second map and the second legend, and I can click that right into my right empty half of my layout. Okay, of course, right now they're identical. But in a moment, I'll show you how we can change one to show different data, different information. And that'll be the key and kind of the final step to our workshop today, is to show different map frames on the same map layout. Okay. So on your left map, your first one, let's click to select it. So you should see it selected in your items here. And in the item properties for that map, we can click lock layers. Okay, this is key. So what we're doing now is we're telling this map frame here on the left to lock the layers. So if we go back to our main QGIS window and change the layers, like I'll turn on my population density map here. When I refresh this, this map on the left will not change. It'll only show the layers when we clicked lock. Okay, this is a key concept for how we can show different information on each of our layouts from all the same QGIS project. So I locked my layers on my left map. On my main QGIS window, I turned that layer off. I'm going to turn on my population density layer, or whichever other layers you'd like to show side by side. And now, if I click refresh, my right map has changed to what I'm showing. But my left map has remained the same. Okay. So my left map, I clicked lock layers on its item properties. My right map is not locked, so it'll show whichever layers are shown on my main window. The legends, because we set them up the way we did to automatically update, they should adjust accordingly. They should automatically change. Nice, Emmanuel. Thanks for sharing. Looking very good. And if I jump back over to my main window, I can rename this regions layer correctly, population density. And that should change in my legend accordingly. So I went to my main window, I right-clicked on that layer and said rename. And automatically, my legend will update. Of course, to make this a perfect map, I would add units and add many more things to this, but just for our training example right now, I think this is quite good. Here, nice, thanks for sharing. Looking good. So here, this is quite cool. So we have this side-by-side comparison, and we can see population density on the right. We can see Ashanti, Central Region, Greater Accra Region. These are densely populated areas in Ghana. And we can see that actually those areas have less health facilities per person than these more rural Upper West and Savannah and Western North regions. So we can kind of, a key concept in cartography is called repetition. So many times we want to show side-by-side maps, or even side-by-side, many maps all in a row, and we let the viewer have their eyes jump between each map, and it'll allow them to see trends. So we can see in this, because we're looking at all health facilities, and we're treating them all the same, a hospital is the same as a clinic in this analysis. The rural low population density areas actually have more health facilities per capita. So it might not be the most in-depth analysis, but for our example for this training, hopefully it's showing some meaningful insights. Great. So just for time, I don't think we'll have enough time to demonstrate, but we could do that similar process. If we wanted to add, let's say, as I can show here, if we wanted to add a third map just to show where Ghana is in a regional context, we could continue those same steps and add a third map. So we would lock the layers for both of these map frames. We would adjust our map to show whatever layers we want on this regional map, and we can add that map frame in as well. So just from that, you can see how adding these additional map frames, whether it's a zoomed out contextual map, or perhaps you might want to zoom in, add another map frame to this corner here to show some more density. Like in this example, we might want to add a map frame that's more zoomed in, or add a map frame that's more zoomed out to show the context. Those are all possible using the same process. Okay. Great, Ted, thank you for sharing. Looking very good. And I like how people are using different base maps, different color schemes, and everybody's maps are a little bit different. Cool. Okay, so our final step right before we're at the end of our training is, well, two things. Let's say you have this layout, but you want to show now totally different data. You can always go up to layout here and duplicate your layout. So you can kind of use this as like a template. You can even say save as template here. And you don't always have to create your new maps from scratch. In fact, you might want to create a template that has a lot of text and everything that will be the exact same on all of your maps. You don't have to recreate that from zero every time, and you can create templates. But for today, let's finish our process by exporting our map. So we can say export as image. So up on layout, export as image. We can choose where to save it. So I'll save it in my data folder for this workshop. I can say save. There'll be some options here on the image type and the quality. We can just say save. I think I chose a PNG file. And then you can inspect your final image. So now this is a PNG image file, and you can check it out. Many times it will be a little different on this final image, the colors or spacing of labels, things like that. So you want to be sure to check it out and make sure it all looks good. It might look a little different here than it did on your QGIS window. For example, I think right here, it could be quite confusing. I should add a line delineating these two maps to show that they are indeed separate, not a continuous map here. Nice, Emmanuel, looking very good. And yes, Moses, I agree. We can add a title, as Christopher did. We could add some scale bars. We could add many more map elements. Would be great. Also, every map should add a date. So here in the Add Items menu, we can add all those things. You can add a logo. Labels are like adding a title or date. Add your data sources. For time right now, I think we need to wrap this up. But of course, this is where you can add all these other items. Great. So that's it. Love seeing all the screenshots and your finished maps. Feel free to keep adding those as you finish up here. And hopefully this was useful. Please provide us feedback, and we'll put a link to a short survey in the chat right now. If you don't mind filling that out, it would really help us in determining what future trainings you would want, what tools. Of course, QGIS we like to teach, but there's many other GIS tools out there as well, and what topics within those tools we should focus on. So if you could fill out this short post-learning survey that Jing has kindly just shared in the chat, we would really appreciate it. And of course, keep placing your final map products in the chat as well. Thank you, Kwong. It's very fun to see those. So with that, I'll just say thank you very much, everyone. I can stay on for a little bit of time if there's any specific questions, but I think after 4 hours, we're probably pretty ready to wrap this up. So thanks very much. Hope to see you at our future trainings, and please be in touch with us if you have any GIS related questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cam. I'm going to be closing the recording, everyone, and we will be sending it out. If you are registered, then everyone who registered will receive the post-learning information. Thank you so much. Oh, there's a question. Here, I can